What is going on, everybody? Welcome to or back to Ryder's Record Collection. My name is Carl. It is March 2021, Mustache March. So I figured I'd come at you with another Albums of the Month video. If you haven't seen any of these before, every month I try to pull out a few albums from my collection that are celebrating some pretty substantial birthdays, talk about them in the hopes of you watching this and maybe listening to that particular album if you have it in your collection, or learning about some new music that you may not have heard about. So like I said, it's March 2021. Here are 6 albums that are celebrating some pretty substantial birthdays here in my collection, and it's a slew of things, so we'll kick it off right now. So this first album was released March 23rd, 1956. It is going to be eligible for Social Security here soon, and it is turning 65 on March 23rd, 2021. It is Elvis Presley's debut studio album, and it was the album that basically made rock and roll. It was rock and roll before rock and roll was a thing. Obviously, you came around with a couple other people that were working on it, but this album was the first of its kind. It was the first album to top the Billboard pop chart, which it did in 1956, and it stayed in that peak position for 10 weeks, so it sat at number 1 on what is the modern day Billboard 200 for 10 weeks in 1956. It was also the first rock and roll album to sell over 1 million copies. I don't know when that was based in, but I'm sure it's sold well over 1 million copies now. But first rock album to sell over 1 million copies, so that's a pretty impressive feat on its own. It has some killer tracks on it. From start to finish, it's a banging album. Some of the standout tracks are Blue Suede Shoes, I Got a Woman, Tutti Frutti, which is a cover of a Little Richard song, and just his voice and the way that he sings on this album is great. And for anyone who is a fan of The Clash, you will recognize this album cover from their album London Calling. You can see the similarities here. They ripped it off, and nice little tribute to Elvis Presley, released in I believe 1979. But anyway, Elvis Presley, March 23rd, 1956 this was released. So March 23rd, 2021, this is turning 65. It can get a Social Security check, and if you have it in your collection, I suggest you play it because it is a very, very good album 65 years later. Okay, so this next album, I knew some singles by this band, and I hadn't really dove into them as an actual band. I knew 1 or 2 songs from the radio, one really popular song, but I work on boats professionally, and I had this engineer on this boat who loved this band, and in particular, he loved the song The Pusher, which is on this album, and he really got me into this band, so much so that I had to buy this compilation album. This is Steppenwolf Gold. This was released in March 1971. It's a greatest hits album by Steppenwolf, and it's turning 50 in March 1971. It doesn't have an exact release date, but March 2021, like I said, this will be 50. This is a killer starting point for anyone who is unfamiliar with Steppenwolf. It is a really good snapshot of this band with some killer tracks. I think the album artwork is really cool. It opens up differently than most other gatefolds, where it opens like that. And some of the songs on here that I really like are Born to Be Wild, Magic Carpet Ride, The Pusher, and Sookie Sookie, along with some other great songs. There's also a cool photo of the band, and it opens up into a poster, which I have upside down, but whole lot going on in this LP. So it's turning 50 this year. Great overview of a pretty solid band, so I suggest you check it out. This next album was also released in March 1971. It is turning 50 in 2021 as well. It is considered a soundtrack, although I haven't seen the movie, and personally I think it's a standalone album. It's from a music festival that happened in 1969 that I really wish I could travel back in time and go see. But this is Woodstock #2, which is a continuation of a 3 LP set called Woodstock, which I believe was released in 1970. It features additional material from various artists that were featured on the first Woodstock album that just couldn't make the cut due to space. So this is basically more of Woodstock, and this is really cool because both these and the first one include crowd noises from the Woodstock Festival. And I believe this is, yeah, this opens up into a opens up like this. I think I can get it all on camera, but that is the concert ground after the fact. And as much as everyone likes to think the hippies were all about free love and the earth and whatnot, they were pretty dirty because they trashed this guy's farm, absolutely destroyed it. And if I'm not mistaken, he went and sued the people that put on Woodstock very unsuccessfully. But great album. It's got stuff by Can Heat, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, Jimi Hendrix, Jefferson Airplane, Mountain, and a few others. So like I said, if you have Woodstock 1, this is a great addition to Woodstock 1 because it's got more of the same stuff that was on Woodstock 1. All right, so we had a 65-year-old, we've had two 50-year-olds that were just released in March. We have another 50-year-old that was also released in March, although this one has a specific birthday. And this is March 5th, 1971. So on March 5th, 2021, this guy is going to be turning 50 years old, and this is Jimi Hendrix, The Cry of Love. This was an album that was released after the unfortunate death of Jimi Hendrix. I love Hendrix. I think it would have been awesome to see what he went on to make had he not died. But this was all stuff that he had recorded for his planned fourth album, and this would have been the fourth album after the breakup of the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And this album kicks. It's so good. I pick up Hendrix anytime I see him. I am a huge Hendrix fan. I love the way this guy plays the guitar and the way that he writes music. I'm not a huge sci-fi guy, but I love Jimi Hendrix sci-fi musical style. So there's some great pictures of Hendrix in there, and some really standout tracks from this are Freedom, Easy Rider, Astro Man, and Angel. So this is an awesome release from Hendrix. Unfortunately, after he died, but all of stuff that would have been his fourth studio album, had he been able to release it and put it out the way that he wanted to, a lot of these tracks would have been on it. This next album was released March 31st, 1976. It is turning 45 on March 31st, 2021. It is Led Zeppelin's Presence. This is a Zeppelin album that I admittedly don't play enough. I listened to it today in preparation for making this video, and it's solid. It's really good. Unfortunately, during the band's run before John Bonham died, this was the lowest selling album of their catalog, but it has held up very well over time. And this, when people say that Zeppelin's the start of hard rock, this is where you see some of those aspects. John Bonham's drumming on this album is very early metal, and I can see where metal and hard rock get influences from this album. I don't consider this a metal album, but I can definitely see the connection between the two. The thing that I like the most about this album is that all of the artwork on this album revolves around the object. So you can see it in all of the artwork on it. That black cylinder box spyglass hourglass thing, that's the object. So that's the basis of the artwork for this album. But overall, this is a very quality Zeppelin album, and I need to spend more time with it. I realized that today when I listened to it. So On March 31st, 2021, this is turning 50, and if it's in your collection, I suggest you spin it, and if you don't catch this in time and you still have it, play it anyway, because it's really good. Okay, and last but certainly not least, we have an infant in my collection, or in this list of birthdays comparatively to other albums. This is, I think, the third or fourth albums of the month thing that I've done, and it's kind of cool because somehow I always manage to have an album that is substantially younger than the rest of the albums by 30 years. Not by meaning to, that's just the way it works out. And this album is turning 5. This is the Struts everybody wants. So there's a little bit of a backstory behind this album and this band. This was 2 or 3 years ago. I was still living at home with my parents. My mom was out of town. My now fiance, at the time, who was my girlfriend, was living in New York. So my dad and I were hanging out. There's a small club near where my parents live called the Culture Room. It's a Tuesday night. I'm bored. I'm looking around and I'm like, oh man, there's this band called the Struts playing for $13. Let's go see the Struts. So I walk into the TV room, 7:30 or something at night on a Tuesday, and I'm like, Dad, let's go to a concert. Why not? Tickets are $13. He's like, oh, I don't know about that. It's a Tuesday. I'm like, come on, man. Concert's going to end at 11. You're going to watch TV till 11 o'clock anyway. Let's do it. He's like, have you ever heard of this band? And I'm like, no, I've never heard of this band called the Struts, but they sound really cool. So I convinced my dad to go. We pay $13 each to go see this concert, and it was one of the best shows I've ever seen. It's a very small club, and it was probably only half full, but the Struts are like a modern day glam rock band, and their singer, his name is Luke Spiller. He is very, very influenced by Freddie Mercury. He's got the whole Ayo thing that he does, and he grew up as a ballet dancer. So he dances, he struts his stuff, which is how they got their name, on stage very well. So my dad and I go, we see this concert, it ends at 11, the house lights of the venue come on, and lo and behold, my dad has friends there. So funny story, this is a killer album, but every time I listen to these guys, I think of that story. It's great. But if you haven't heard of the Struts, I strongly suggest you check them out. But as I mentioned, this is turning 5. It was released on March 4th, 2016. So on March 4th, 2021, this is turning 5 years old, a mere infant compared to the rest of the albums on this list. But it is great. If you haven't heard of the Struts, this band or this album is awesome. They have some great, great tracks on here. I mean, the whole album is awesome. Some of my favorite songs are Kiss This, Put Your Money on Me, Dirty Sexy Money, The Old Switcheroo. If you don't listen to any song that I mentioned, listen to The Old Switcheroo. It is a very funny song about swapping girlfriends out. She Makes Me Feel, Black Swan, Times Are Changing, Where Did She Go? Definitely suggest the Struts. And on March 4th, 2021, this is turning 5 years old. So if you have it in your collection, I suggest you spin it. So that concludes the albums of the month for March 2021. I hope you guys enjoyed this. 6 albums that are celebrating some pretty substantial birthdays. This year, since it's 2021, I'm trying to stick with the 1s and the 6s. So next month I'll do the same thing, and the goal with this is to show you guys some albums that you may have in your collection that are having some big birthdays, or to turn you guys on to some new music that you may not have heard before. I am Carl. This is Ryder's Record Collection. If you like this video, please throw it a like. If you like the channel, please subscribe and check out some other videos. I will have some more content out soon. I plan to do a record cleaning video and some reviews on some products pertaining to record cleaning, record weights, random things like that. More videos where I talk music. So like I said, if you like it, please subscribe. If you like the video, please throw it a like, and I'll have more stuff out soon. And that's where we're at. Cheers. Be easy.